Welcome back to Spiritwind. I'm Pam Hart, and Spiritwind is a study group for spiritual adventurers. We meet every Wednesday evening at about 5:30 at Unity of Auburn, 1212 High Street. And we have this program just to introduce the subject matter to you of which we will be speaking about, to encourage you to be interested. Come, talk to us about it. Bring your ideas, challenge us. And with that, I wanted to go over a little bit of what we've been talking about in October. October was the witches of the Bible. And you wouldn't think that there were witches in the Bible. But Rick, our host and teacher, guru, I don't know what we call you, he has actually written this book about the forgotten witches of ancient Israel. And we went over this book in class. And Rick, why was it that you even wrote this book?
Well, I had studied the Bible many times, and I had come across this passage, and it's Exodus 22, verse 18. It says, "Thou shalt not allow or suffer a witch to live." And I had always thought of that when I read that, what are referred to as the burning times, or other words, the burning of witches during the Middle Ages. But then it occurred to me that this was written in the Hebrew Bible, in fact in the Torah, and that these are witches that were in the time of Moses that were being spoken of, and not in the Middle Ages. But we have it written as the witches because the King James Bible was published in 1611, which was right in the middle of the witch craze.
But it's true then that the Israelites took a vow to God to not commune with witches, not seek them out, and so forth?
Right, and there's many places in the Hebrew Bible, and there's one text in the New Testament that referred to witches in a negative way, that the true believers should not associate with. And in fact, in Exodus 22:18 says they should even be put to death.
Yet, we do have one big example in the Bible with the witch of Endor.
Right.
And that the witch was sought out.
Right. That was a story of King Saul, the first king of Israel. And when he had disobeyed God, he and his prophet Samuel had died. He felt he had no way to speak to God anymore, and so he sought out a witch. And it's she's referred to as the Witch of Endor. And in fact, on my book, the cover is an artist's rendition of the Witch of Endor. And Saul went to her to have her conjure up Samuel so he could ask him a question, and she did. But she feared for her life, and she had to have a pledge from him that he wouldn't kill her.
But then Saul ended up dying anyway.
Yeah,
so.
And that's what Samuel had told him.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have examples of witches in the ancient Israeli time. And so then you go into witches in the burning time then too?
Right. And we talked about that. And it was just a horrible time because the church and state had found those texts in the Bible, not allowing a witch to live, and then they started seeking out witches, which were mainly the pagan, which actually literally means country folk. They were more of the country folk that didn't live in the cities, and those communities depended on midwives who also practiced with herbs and things, healing and so forth. And so they called them witches because they didn't worship the same God. And because of that, they ended up being tortured and put to death. And the sad thing about it, I mean, as if that wasn't sad enough, but they were forced out of their own income and property to pay for everything, from their torture to the actual burning on at the stake. And they had to pay for the people that tortured them. They had to pay for the wood that was used to burn them, and for the guy that did it. And it was all away, and all their property would be confiscated
To the church?
to the church or the
church
state.
took it?
And when you think of, there were some whole cities where there weren't any women left.
Oh my goodness.
And so they took all that property,
Mhm.
you know. So it was a moneymaker for the church.
Well, I noticed that this month, the National Geographic came out with a magazine all about witches.
Right.
And it's a really good tour of witches around the world. So witches weren't just in England, they weren't just in the Americas, they were in Japan, they were the pranksters, the jinn, the trolls. Every culture seemed to have their witches.
And every culture does.
And so did you want to say something about witches of today?
The thing I wanted to say about witches today is that witches are a very benign spiritual path. In fact, their path, as their ethic, their code, they only have one, and it harms none. Do what you will.
Oh.
So they are not, as their stereotype, Satanists that worship the devil, or they practice black magic, or the villain that we see in Disney movies, or even the witches that we see in C.S. Lewis's children's books. They're just people that worship a earth-based form of spirituality. So.
But it does seem like a lot of children's stories have witches in them.
Right.
And you can see from fairy tales and from long ago how they've brought that witch into today's realm even.
Right, and they're always seen as negative. Yeah. I wanted to close this section with just a statement that kind of puts this in perspective in terms of Christianity and some of the other religions and Wicca. This is a book called Christianity After Religion, and it was written by Diana Butler Bass. She says this, she says, the number of Americans who do not attend church increased 92% in 1991. And Christianity in America has suffered a loss of 9.7 percentage points in 11 years. At the same time, Islamic mosque in America has increased 25% since 94. Adherence to Buddhism has increased 170% in a decade. And the fastest growing religion is Wicca.
Oh my goodness. So Wicca as a religion in America is growing and growing.
Yes.
And even has more attendees than some of the basic other religions.
Right. In fact, statistics tell us that there's about a million neo-pagans. Neo-pagans contain a large group, but largely are Wiccan people. That's over 1 million. That's larger than a number of worldwide churches like, for instance, Jehovah's Witness and Seventh-day Adventists, just to give a couple examples.
but the pagan, neo-pagan, and Wicca are more earth-based spirituality
Right.
religions at this point.
Right.
So that kind of makes sense to me, because with all of our concern over the earth and climate change and what we can do, I think people are looking to the earth now and actually realizing that Mother Earth is there for a reason.
That's right.
And we better appreciate that.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Well, that's great. Okay, well, that was October, and I think we have one more week at Spiritwind to discuss that. But then in November, we're going to go to a whole new topic. And
Yes.
what is that topic?
Well, we're going to be looking at one of the greatest mystics of all time, and his name is Meister Eckhart. I was introduced to him by my mentor, Matthew Fox, and Meister Eckhart lived from about 1260 to 1329, and he was a mystic, he was a prophet, a feminist, a philosopher, a preacher, a theologian, a teacher, a spiritual genius, who was in the end unjustly condemned for heresy. He taught at the University of Paris. He preached in the language of the people rather than Latin, although he could preach in Latin. And while Hindus and Buddhists claim Eckart as one of their own, most Christians have never heard of him.
So here he's a Christian mystic, a prophet, a philosopher, a theologian, and a feminist? What makes him a feminist?
Well, that sounds kind of strange, but in the 13th century there was a women's movement. And it was a pretty radical movement in terms of the time they were living in. Because if you think in the 13th century, really, a woman had only one of two options in terms of a career. She was either a wife and a mother, or she was a nun. That was it. And what happened in the 13th century was a movement called the Beguines. And the Beguines were a group of women, and there were a number of these places. They would have like a commune-like setup, and they would just be women living together with other women without being married and without being a nun or anything. And because of that, they were seen as problems to the church. And Meister Eckhart was a big supporter of the Beguines. I mean, they would have different, like ironsmith would be a woman, a carpenter would be a woman. They took care of all the things in their community as women. And so that's why it was a feminist thing.
Because he spoke up and stood up for them.
Stood up for them, yes. I was saying that he was also a friend of the Buddhists even before many Christians knew of him. There was a D.T. Suzuki wrote a book on, it was titled Mysticism, Christians and Buddhists. And when Thomas Merton, who was a great Catholic monk, Thomas Merton, saw the book and saw that it opened, the first chapter was Meister Eckhart in this book, Mysticism, Christians and Buddhists. And he said something like, but Eckart isn't even accepted by the church. And Suzuki's response, well, that's your problem, not mine. And later, it was found in his journals, of which there are 7 volumes, the size of encyclopedias of his journals, which I ended up reading. But in his journals, numerous times, he wrote in the margins, Eckart is my lifeboat.
So can you describe a little bit about Meister Eckhart's form of spirituality?
Okay. His form of spirituality was a creation-centered spirituality, and he this is a quote he makes of it. He says, "This path is beautiful and pleasant and joyful and familiar." And what he taught seemed very familiar to me, and that's why I was attracted to his teachings.
So, Matthew Fox talks about Meister Eckhart too, and I think he mentions there are 4 paths.
Right. Yeah, in this book, Meditations with Meister Eckhart, he refers to the 4 paths of the creation-centered spirituality, and the first is what he calls the via positiva. These are Latin terms, but all via positiva means it's the positive way. And so the first path is of awe and wonder, just being in rapture at seeing the universe and nature and creation and everything. And the next path is called the via negativa, which is the negative path, and that's the path that we all experience when we're needing to let go of things or let be things. It's also the path of sadness and grief and those sorts of things. Then there's the via creativa, which is the path of creativity, and we are all creative. Creativity isn't just restricted to painters and authors and musicians. Creativity is used in every area of our life, whether we realize it or not, whether it's cooking a good meal or gardening or even working on a car in a way that you figure out things that others can't. That's what creativity is. And the last path, the 4th path, is the via transformativa, the transformative way, and that is where we think of how we can transform our own lives as well as the society we live in to be a more compassionate and just place.
So the goal is to study these paths?
Mm-hmm.
Is that mainly what Meister Eckhart is taking us on, this journey to discover these paths and how we can become more familiar with them?
Yes.
And hopefully, I guess, master them.
Yes.
Now, do those 4 paths branch out into other paths, like the Buddhists have their fourfold path and then the eightfold?
Eightfold and all that. No, it's pretty much those. I've tried it myself in writing some other things that I've written to kind of brainstorm. It seems like pretty much anything you can think of life, any activity, fits in one of those categories. It's a creative work, it's a transformative work, or it's negative or positive. You know? So, anyway.
And so why did you decide Meister Eckhart should be in the month of November for us?
I will actually show you that at the end. I'm going to read a few of his quotes so you can see what he sounds like and the kind of thing he writes. And then I'll tell you at the end why we're doing it, because then it'll become clear.
All right.
So, let's see. This is the first one I'm going to read. See, well, I'll just read it first and then I'll talk about it. Apprehend God in all things, for God is in all things. Every single creature is full of God and is a book about God. Every creature is a word of God. If I spent enough time with the tiniest creature, even a caterpillar, I would never have to prepare a sermon so full of God is every creature. So Eckart came from a school of thought that saw God revealed not just in the Bible, but in creation as well.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why we talk of it as being
Creation
creation-centered.
spirituality.
Yeah,
Yes.
creation spirituality. Let's see. Okay. Let's see, this one says, we understand God equally in all things, for God is equally in all things. All beings love one another. All creatures are interdependent. And that's very Buddhist in its thought. Buddhists talk about interdependence of all things in the web of life and such. And so did Meister Eckhart, and I think that's why some of the Buddhists really liked what he had to say.
And is that also why he was deemed a heretic?
Well, you'll see as we read a few more of these, you'll see why he was considered a heretic, because some of the things he said are really different. Like, listen to this. How should you love God? I will tell you. Love God as God is. This means love God as God is, a not God, a not mind, a not person, a not image. More than this, love God as God is, a pure, clear one who is separate from all two-ness.
Okay.
And that, again, is very, very Buddhist. And the fact that seeing God as a clear one who is separate from all two-ness is what in Buddhism they call non-duality.
Oh, okay.
And so this is one of the rare times in Christianity you get a teaching of non-duality. He also had a real sense of humor. This is one he says. The most beautiful thing which a person can say about God would be for that person to remain silent from the wisdom of an inner wealth. So, be silent and quit flapping your gums about God. I thought that was kind of funny. This is one it's just a short sentence, but it's very important. He said, asceticism is of no great importance. Within Catholicism, especially in those days, but still today, asceticism, which is the giving up of things.
Mm-hmm.
Like, asceticism is like priests becoming celibate and fasting.
Or going off into some mountaintop and
being a hermit.
Being a hermit.
All those kind of
any
things.
of those kind of things.
In fact, just two examples of very extreme people that were ascetics. There was one named Simeon Stylites, and he stood on a pillar for 36 years. And then there was another guy, Saint Peregrine of Laziosi, and he stood without sitting for 30 years.
Okay.
And so when Eckart says asceticism is of no great importance, that's what he's saying. So what if you can stand up that long or do that? That's nothing. It doesn't make you closer to God or show that you're more spiritual than anyone else or anything like that. Let's see, I had one in here. Oh yeah. This is the kind of thing that got him in trouble.
Okay.
The other ones, they wouldn't even understood what he was talking about. He said, all paths lead to God, for God is on them all evenly, for the person who knows with transformed knowledge. In other words, the person that has transformed knowledge will understand this, that God is on all paths, not just on one.
Mm-hmm.
This is he has a couple of these that are very interesting, where he tries to picture himself as being a woman giving birth. He says, I once had a dream. I dreamt that I, even though a man, was pregnant and full with nothingness, like a woman who is with child, and that out of this nothingness, God was born.
Interesting.
So, when you got some guy saying that he gives birth to God, it's not taken real well by the church.
No, I guess not.
Then he takes the Hail Mary and does his own thing with it.
Okay.
This would be another one that probably wouldn't be so good.
It didn't go very well with the church.
He said, what good is it to me if Mary is full of grace and if I am not also full of grace? What good is it to me for the Creator to give birth to His Son if I do not also give birth to Him in my time and my culture? But just a couple more. You may call God love, you may call God goodness, but the best name for God is compassion. And that would also ring true with Buddhists, because they talk about Buddha as the compassionate Buddha. And then this last one, this is interesting because this is him taking a stab at the Trinity, which is very important in the Catholic Church. Do you want to know what goes on in the core of the Trinity? Want to know? Does anyone want to know? I will tell you. In the core of the Trinity, the Father laughs and gives birth to the Son, and the Son laughs back at the Father and gives birth to the Spirit. The whole Trinity laughs and gives birth to us.
Oh, okay.
So that's what he says. Now,
now the question, why are we doing Meister Eckhart in November?
Why are we doing Meister Eckhart in November?
Yes.
And that's because one of his sayings that he says is a very famous saying, and probably some people don't, I'm sure people have heard of it, but they didn't know it was him.
Oh, okay.
Okay? And I think of November, when I think of November, I think of Thanksgiving.
Right.
It's a time for Thanksgiving and so forth. And this, he said, if the only prayer you pray in your whole life was thank you, that would suffice.
Okay. Thank you for Thanksgiving. Definitely. So these are the type of things that we talk about at Spiritwind.
Right.
And we'll go deeper into Meister Eckhart's life and probably find out where else he got himself in trouble.
Yes, we will.
Okay, so come and join us, please. And again, it's at Unity of Auburn on Wednesday evenings at 5:30. There's no charge for this class. Everyone is welcome. Please bring your thoughts, your questions, your challenges, whatever you may have, and join us for this discussion. And I really want to thank you, Rick, for this session. And thank you for talking to us about witches. And we really look forward to talking about Meister Eckhart.